Good evening. Thank you for coming out tonight. It's really a pleasure to be able to share a little bit about some of the ideas and concepts that have had a great impact on my life. You know, it's unusual for us because we're so busy, so much hustle bustle in our everyday lives, that we would take the time to step back and really critically examine what our perception of reality is and whether that perception affects our life goals and our life values. You know, I was in medical school and I'd go to class every day and I would be taught by our professors that man is just a machine, that all that I am can be expressed and explained by just chance, chemical reactions, and mechanistic principles. In fact, my neurosciences professor would tell me, you know, Descartes said, I think, therefore I am, but that's not true. In fact, you neurotransmit, therefore you are. You're just a collection of chemicals. If I boiled you down, you'd just be $20 worth of stuff. And, you know, I understood that, and I learned all about the theories of evolution and how time plus chance led us to be what we are. But then you leave class and you start thinking, you realize there's a spiritual side and a human side to our personality. And I would find myself kind of shutting my brain off one half at a time, saying, okay, I'm a person over here, and over here I'm a machine, and I wouldn't let those two areas touch each other because it didn't make sense. You have this sort of incoherency between these two worldviews. And so tonight I'd like to explore with you a few thoughts that I've had regarding this topic. And it's interesting because there is no one in this room that doesn't have to answer a certain set of questions. You don't have to be formally asked this, but in fact, we all are interested in who we are. Where did I come from? What is our origin? Why am I here? What is our purpose? And where am I going? What is my destiny? What is going to happen to me? And each of us has to deal with these questions, even if we don't write them down on a test, because we answer these questions just by the way we live our lives, by the people we associate with, who we marry, do we go to school, what's our job like, what do I watch on TV, what books do I read, how do I spend my thought life? Those things tell us what the answers to these questions are, and we each have to grapple with them. There's no one in this room who doesn't have to deal with this. But tonight I'd like to focus on just one of these questions, and I think this would give us a handle on getting a grip on the other three. Where did I come from? What is our origins? That's the topic that we're going to look at tonight. Now, we do have a subject of something called a cosmology. Now, cosmology is the study of origins, where things came from. And all available lines of evidence, both in theory and in practice, that is experimental evidence, point to the fact that the total energy in the universe is a constant. Now we understand, Einstein told us, and we understand that mass, that is things, and energy are interchangeable. But the sum of those two things are neither created nor destroyed. And as we go through time starting on the left and moving to the right, the total sum of that mass plus energy is a constant. That is the first law of thermodynamics. We understand that to be true from all lines of evidence. But there's another law we need to talk about. And during the period that we can observe things happening, that's that block in the center there, we notice that available energy and coherent or complex specified information always decreases over time. A good example of this is, say, your car. Your car never gets better over time. You have to take it into the shop. The thing will eventually run down and end up in a junkyard. In addition, the gas that you put into it, which is available energy, gets dissipated as mechanical energy and heat, and it is gone. You can't get that gas back. Over time, we lose available energy and we lose coherent, specified information. That is what makes your car work. If we extrapolate that decrease that we see in our observed time frame, we can see that the universe will continue to run down. We know of no examples that countermand this principle. And interestingly, if we go back, we also see that there must have been a time in the universe that we were maximally wound up, that there was a maximum amount of available energy and specified complexity. Because what we see is running down. There must have been a time when the water was coming over the waterfall, when we had maximal energy available. Now, I'm not here to tell you exactly when that occurred. But I am here to say that that initial event did occur, and we do not have infinite time backwards. There was an initial event. Some people call it the Big Bang, but it certainly is the case that the universe sprang out of existence from nowhere, maximally wound up with information and available energy. Now, Einstein developed the theories that showed this to be mathematically necessary. And he really didn't like how this looked because it had a certain theological bent that he didn't agree with. So he inserted a cosmological constant, that is, an extra little fudge factor in his equations. But this made these equations mathematically untenable. And he called that was the biggest mistake of my life. And now the scientific community is united behind this idea that the universe sprang out of nothing, that we do not have infinite time backwards. I'll show you why that's important. Around the turn of the century, there were two ideas. One was that the universe has always existed. There was no need for any design or designer. The universe just always is and always will be. But that's not what modern science tells us, either in theory or in experimental practice. We are sure now that the universe did have a beginning. The question I'd like to look at with you tonight is there a designer or not? Did the universe be a product of time plus chance, or is it the case that there is a hand behind the universe designing and providing information? Two terms that I'd like to avoid tonight are evolution and creation. Both of these terms come loaded with a lot of baggage and are imprecise in dealing with what I'd like to talk to you about tonight. I'll illustrate what I mean. Suppose someone said to me, Gary, do you believe in evolution? I said, well, what parts do you mean? Because part of evolution is natural selection. I, for one, can vouch for natural selection because I know it occurs in nature. Try to find a living dodo bird. They're gone. Natural selection has worked, and you can't find one. We're told that the spotted owl is in danger, could be extinct. Listen, this does occur, could happen. Does that mean evolution is a proven fact? Not necessarily, because we're taking a piece of it, sort of ill-defined definition, proving a piece and then saying, oh, the whole must be true. So what I'm talking about tonight is something called naturalism, and that means the universe is all there ever will be. Time plus chance are the only operating forces. There is no nature, capital N, only nature, small n. A competing cosmology, or idea of origins, is design. That is, that there is some information that's been put into the system from outside. The question I'd like to deal with first is, can a design be discerned in nature? Is it possible for us to tell whether something is a product of chance or whether there's a product of design? William Paley thought the same thing. This is William Paley, who lived in the beginning of the 18th century. He was a theologian, philosopher, scientist, a real Renaissance man of his day. And he had an idea that went something like this. He said, if I chanced upon a watch while I was walking in a meadow, and I picked it up and looked at it, saw the gears turning, and saw that it had a purpose in keeping time, then I would surmise that it had evidence of design and therefore a designer. And the way he put it was, this watch has every indication of contrivance, every manifestation of design. And he extrapolated that thinking to biological machines, that is, animals and people. He said these same biological machines exhibit indications of contrivance and manifestation of design to a degree beyond computation. That's the way he put it. And that was common thinking in the early 1800s, and scientists were pretty happy with the idea that there was design and that we could study nature and understand that there was some grand plan behind what we see. Because when you look at the gears and the knobs and switches, it's hard to believe that that could occur by any other means other than someone designing it. But around 1850, Darwin and other scientists, he wasn't the only one to think this, said, maybe there's another way that this could have happened, and the world was ready for a different idea than a designer. So Darwin proposed a set of truths that would allow him to construct an alternative theory for our origins. First is something called hereditary transmission. He noted that you look like your parents, you share their traits, and your kids look like you, they share your traits. So we pass down characteristics from generation to generation. There's also incidental change from generation to generation. He didn't know how that happened then. We have a better idea now. But there are variations within the population of descendants. Because those variations resulted in differential ability, that is, differing abilities to survive and propagate, natural selection could work to change and shift the population genetically and create new species. This was his idea that revolutionized science. People were ready to hear this. He felt that time plus chance were all that's necessary in order to create the biological constructs that we see today. As evidence, he looked at finches' beaks famously, but more importantly, the fossils that were available at that time. And this picture is from the British Museum, and if you had been there, we had the opportunity to go this summer. You start out with the little horse, the little bigger horse, and they're lined up next to each other and said, oh, that really makes sense. It must be the case that the little horse became the bigger horse, and over time, we had this smooth sweep of evolution, or naturalism, if you will, and he called it the ascent of man, and how man came to be through this gradual changes over time through the hereditary process. What really happened was that Darwin, in his thinking, made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist, and it has become the dominant scientific paradigm of our time. I'd like to start by pointing out to you, though, that there are some things that Darwin couldn't know. And the theory of time plus chance has some drawbacks that Darwin couldn't have been aware of. To start with, Darwin put a lot of stock in the fact that over time, or his hope that over time, as we dug up more fossils, that we would be able to elucidate this gradual change that he saw as necessary for his theory. So you see the little skeletons of the horses there, they got bigger, but the fossil record has been very uncooperative in fulfilling his claim. And what we see in the fossil record are species popping out of nowhere in the fossil record, staying a long time unchanged, and then disappearing from the fossil record. Instead of a smooth transition, we see points in a sea of chaos, and you can't really put them together. And instead of the smooth